The sheriff's cruiser kicked up a cloud of dust as it rolled down my gravel driveway at 6:47 a.m. on what should have been a peaceful Tuesday morning. I was standing barefoot on my front porch, coffee mug in hand, watching my chickens peck around their coop, when Deputy Martinez stepped out of his vehicle with that look every property owner dreads, the one that says someone with a clipboard has been whispering in official ears. "Morning, Kyle," he called out, adjusting his hat against the early sun. "Got a complaint about unpermitted structures on your property? Mind if we take a look around?" I set my coffee down slowly, already knowing exactly who had made that call. "What kind of structures?" "Exactly? Fence extension along your north boundary. Report says it's blocking community access to a shared trail." He pulled out a folded paper. "This from the Meadowbrook Estates OA board. Says you're in violation of community standards." That's when I started laughing. Not because it was funny, but because after 18 months of escalating harassment from my self-appointed neighborhood dictator, Sandra Patterson, she'd finally made the mistake I'd been waiting for. "Deputy Martinez," I said, still shuckling, "I think you need to see something." The confusion in his eyes told me everything. Sandra had been so focused on making my life miserable that she'd forgotten one crucial detail, a detail that was about to turn her entire campaign against me into a legal nightmare that would end her HOA presidency and land her in handcuffs. But let me back up and explain how we got here. Because this story starts long before that morning, with Sandra's latest failed power play. My name is Kyle Henderson, and I'm a 42-year-old retired Army engineer who bought 5 acres of paradise in rural Texas after 20 years of service. After deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan, all I wanted was peace, quiet, and the freedom to build something with my own hands. My property sits on the edge of Meadowbrook Estates, a fancy subdivision where houses start at $500,000 and the HOA fees run $300 a month for the privilege of having someone else dictate the color of your mailbox. When I bought my land in March 2022, I did my homework. The property had been agricultural for decades, with a small farmhouse, a barn, and enough space for the workshop I'd always dreamed of building. Most importantly, it was specifically excluded from any HOA jurisdiction, a fact I had verified by 3 different real estate attorneys before signing the deed. The exclusion was written into the original county development plan in 1987, grandfathering my parcel as agricultural exempt. When the subdivision was approved, the first few months were everything I'd hoped for. I renovated the farmhouse, built a proper workshop in the barn, and started a small chicken operation with 24 heritage breed hens. My nearest neighbor, Tom Webber, lived about a quarter-mile away on the subdivision side and seemed friendly enough when we met at the mailbox. His wife, Emily, even brought me cookies when I moved in, joking that it was nice to have someone nearby who wouldn't complain about their rooster crowing at dawn. That's when I first heard about Sandra Patterson. She runs the HOA like her personal kingdom. Emily warned me over coffee on my back porch that first week. Been president for 8 years running? Nobody challenges her anymore because she makes life hell for anyone who crosses her. Emily glanced toward the subdivision, as if Sandra might be watching us through binoculars. She tried to fine us last year for planting native wildflowers instead of approved landscaping. Cost us $3,000 in legal fees to fight it. I shrugged it off. Good thing I'm not in the HOA then. Emily's expression grew serious. "Kyle, Sandra doesn't see it that way. She considers everything within a mile of the subdivision to be under her sphere of influence. She's been trying to force the county to expand HOA authority for years." I should have paid more attention to that warning. The first contact came in June, 3 months after I'd moved in. I was working in my shop when I heard a car door slam outside. Through the window, I saw a woman in her 50s climbing out of a white BMW, dressed like she was heading to a country club board meeting, despite the 90-degree heat. She had that particular hairstyle that screams, "I demand to speak to your manager," and carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to immediate compliance. Sandra Patterson had arrived. "Excuse me," she called out as I emerged from the shop. "Are you the new property owner?" "Kyle Henderson," I said, extending a hand she didn't take. "Sandra Patterson, president of the Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association." She produced a tablet and stylus like she was conducting a military inspection. "I'm here about several violations that have been reported." I looked around my property, genuinely confused. Violations of what? Community standards, unauthorized livestock, unapproved outbuildings, and, she gestured at my chickens, noise ordinance violations. "Your rooster has been disturbing residents during quiet hours." "Ma'am, I'm not part of your HOA. This is agricultural land." Sandra's smile was arctic. "Everyone in this community has a responsibility to maintain property values and aesthetic standards. I have authority from the county to enforce." "No," I interrupted. "You don't?" That smile faltered for just a moment before returning full force. "We'll see about that." She made several notes on her tablet. "I'm documenting these violations for the county. You can expect formal notice within the week." As she drove away, I called my real estate attorney, David Ross, who'd handled my purchase. "David, can the HOA force me to comply with their rules even though I'm not a member?" "Absolutely not," he said without hesitation. "Your deed specifically excludes you from any HOA jurisdiction. They have zero legal authority over your property. If they try to pressure you, document everything and call me immediately." The formal notice arrived 5 days later. A cease and desist letter, demanding I remove my chickens, tear down my unapproved agricultural structures, and submit to a property inspection within 30 days. The letter claimed authority under County Ordinance 847B, which governed community standards in unincorporated areas. I spent an hour researching Ordinance 847B. It didn't exist. That's when I realized Sandra Patterson had made her first legal mistake. But it wouldn't be her last. Over the next year, Sandra's campaign against me escalated in ways that would have been comical if they weren't so malicious. She filed noise complaints about my rooster with the county sheriff's office, complaints that were quickly dismissed when deputies confirmed the rooster crowed during legal hours and my property was zoned agricultural. She reported me to code enforcement for unpermitted structures, resulting in an inspection that found everything properly built and documented. When legitimate channels failed, Sandra got creative. In August, I came home from a grocery run to find orange spray paint on my fence posts. The paint marked alleged easement violations, where my fence supposedly encroached on public land. I called the county surveyor, who confirmed my fence was 6 feet inside my property line, and the orange marks were completely inaccurate. The surveyor also mentioned this was the 3rd time in a month he'd been called out to properties near Meadowbrook Estates for similar complaints. September brought the incident with my mailbox. I discovered someone had covered it with official-looking stickers declaring it non-compliant with Postal Service standards. The local postmaster, a friend from my Army days, assured me my mailbox was perfectly fine and someone was trying to interfere with mail delivery, a federal offense. October escalated to property damage. I found my chicken coop's wire fencing cut in 3 places overnight. Allowing my hens to escape, it took me 6 hours to round them up, and I lost 2 to local predators. I installed security cameras the next week, but whoever was responsible had been careful to avoid the areas I could monitor from the house. By November, Sandra had recruited allies. Tom and Emily Weber stopped returning my waves when we passed on the county road. Other subdivision residents began driving slowly past my property, taking pictures with their phones. I later learned Sandra had been circulating a petition, claiming my agricultural activities were attracting pests and lowering property values throughout the subdivision. December brought the anonymous letters, hate mail warning me to conform or leave, and threatening escalated action if I didn't comply with community standards. The letters came weekly, always unsigned. always delivered to my mailbox in the dead of night. But Sandra's biggest mistake came in January, when she decided to involve law enforcement with false reports. The first false police report claimed I was operating an unlicensed commercial poultry operation that violated county zoning laws. Deputy Martinez responded, took one look at my 24 chickens, and politely explained that my operation was well within agricultural exemption limits. The second report alleged I was storing hazardous agricultural chemicals without proper permits. The resulting inspection by the county fire marshal found nothing but standard feed and basic veterinary supplies. The third false report claimed I had built unpermitted structures that blocked emergency vehicle access to the subdivision. This one brought a full code enforcement team who spent 2 hours measuring and documenting before confirming that all my buildings were properly permitted and my driveway actually improved emergency access by providing a turnaround point. Each false report went into my growing file of documented harassment. David Ross had been preparing for months, gathering evidence of Sandra's systematic campaign to force me off my property. We had photographs, recorded phone calls, witness statements, and a paper trail of legal violations that would make any prosecutor smile. But Sandra wasn't done. Her final, fatal mistake came in late January, when she decided to claim authority she didn't possess. I was in my workshop when I heard vehicles approaching. Through the window, I saw Sandra's BMW followed by a county truck and 2 men in hard hats. I stepped outside to find Sandra directing them toward my fence line like she owned the place. "What's going on here?" I called out. "County survey," one of the men replied. "Consulting a clipboard. We're here to verify property boundaries related to an easement dispute." Sandra stepped forward with that familiar Arctic smile. "The HOA is exercising our legal right to verify encroachments on community property." That's when I knew I had her. "Ma'am," I said calmly, "you just claimed legal authority. You don't possess on property. You don't own to authorize a survey. You have no right to request." The county surveyors looked confused. Sandra's smile wavered. "I need to see your authorization for this survey," I continued, "because according to my deed and county records, you have zero legal standing to request any action on my property." The lead surveyor turned to Sandra. "Ma'am, we'll need to see documentation of your authority to request this survey." Sandra's face flushed red. "I'm the HOA president. I have county authorization to—" "No," I interrupted. "You don't? And I can prove it." That's when I pulled out my phone and called David Ross, putting him on speaker. "David, I need you to explain to these county employees and Mrs. Patterson exactly what legal authority the Meadowbrook Estates HOA has over my property." David's voice was crystal clear. "None whatsoever. The property is specifically excluded from HOA jurisdiction under the 1987 Development Agreement. Any claim of authority is legally invalid and potentially constitutes harassment." The county surveyors packed up their equipment and left within 10 minutes, apologizing for the confusion. Sandra stood in my driveway, realizing for the first time that her year-long campaign had created a legal nightmare that was about to come crashing down on her head. But I wasn't done documenting her mistakes. The next morning, I received a certified letter from Sandra demanding that I pay $12,000 in accumulated fines for ongoing violations of community standards. The letter threatened legal action if payment wasn't received within 10 days and claimed the HOA had authority to place a lien on my property. That letter was the smoking gun David had been waiting for. "Kyle," he said when I brought it to his office, "she just committed several felonies, fraudulent claims of authority, attempted extortion, and threats to file false liens. We have everything we need to destroy her legally." David filed a comprehensive lawsuit against Sandra Patterson and the Meadowbrook Estates HOA that same week. The filing included 18 months of documented harassment, 12 false police reports, evidence of property damage, and Sandra's written admission of fraudulent authority claims. We also filed criminal complaints for harassment. extortion, and filing false police reports. But the real bombshell came when David's investigation uncovered Sandra's pattern of abuse against other non-HOA residents. Court documents revealed that Sandra had been running similar harassment campaigns against 7 other property owners over the past 5 years. She had cost the county thousands in unnecessary inspections and surveys, tied up law enforcement with false reports, and systematically targeted anyone who refused to submit to her fictional authority. The criminal investigation expanded rapidly. Prosecutors discovered Sandra had been using HOA funds to hire private investigators to harass non-members, had forged county documents to support her fictional authority claims, and had even attempted to file fraudulent liens against properties outside HOA jurisdiction. The day of reckoning came on a Tuesday morning in March. Exactly 1 year after Sandra's first visit to my property, I was drinking coffee on my front porch when the convoy arrived. 3 sheriff's cruisers, a white sedan with county prosecutor plates, and David Ross in his Tesla. Deputy Martinez stepped out of the lead cruiser with handcuffs already in his hand. "Morning, Kyle," he called out with a grin. "Got a warrant to serve today. But this time you're not the target." The convoy continued past my gate toward the subdivision, where Sandra Patterson was about to discover that impersonating government authority and filing false police reports carries serious federal penalties. The arrest was captured by local news crews who had been tipped off about the HOA fraud bust. Video of Sandra being led away in handcuffs while protesting her innocence went viral on social media, spawning dozens of "Karen gets arrested" memes and bringing national attention to the case. The legal consequences were swift and devastating. Sandra was charged with 12 felony counts, including fraud, extortion, filing false police reports, and misuse of public resources. The HOA's insurance company immediately settled our civil lawsuit for $75,000 to avoid further liability. Sandra's husband divorced her within 2 months, and their house went on the market as she burned through their savings on legal fees. The Meadowbrook Estates HOA board voted unanimously to remove Sandra as president and ban her from all future involvement in community governance. Several board members resigned rather than face potential criminal charges for enabling her harassment campaigns. But the most satisfying consequence was the county's response. Prosecutors uncovered evidence that Sandra had cost taxpayers over $200 in unnecessary inspections, false police responses, and fraudulent legal proceedings over 5 years. The county sued her personally for restitution and banned her from ever filing complaints or requests for government services without supervisory approval. 6 months later, Sandra and her remaining family moved to another state. The Meadowbrook Estates HOA implemented new oversight procedures and actually apologized to me and the other targeted property owners. Several neighbors who had shunned me during Sandra's campaign stopped by to welcome me properly to the community. Tom and Emily Weber brought cookies again, an apology for believing Sandra's lies about my property threatening their home values. "We should have known better," Emily admitted. "Our property values actually went up after all this media attention. Turns out, people want to live near someone who stands up to bullies." Today, my 5 acres remain exactly as agricultural and HOA-free as the day I bought them. My chickens roam free. My rooster crows at dawn. And my workshop projects continue without interference from anyone with a clipboard and delusions of authority. The security cameras I installed during Sandra's harassment campaign remain active, not because I'm paranoid, but because I learned an important lesson about documenting everything when dealing with people who mistake HOA presidency for actual governmental power. Every few months, I get calls from property owners across the country facing similar harassment from power-hungry HOA officials. I always give them the same advice: document everything. Know your legal rights, and never let anyone intimidate you into surrendering property rights you legally possess. The fence that started Sandra's war against me still stands exactly where I built it, 6 feet inside my property line. Properly permitted, and completely legal. Sometimes I look at it and remember that one person's delusions of authority can become their own legal nightmare when they target someone who knows their rights and isn't afraid to defend them. Sandra Patterson learned the hard way that HOA presidency doesn't grant immunity from criminal prosecution for harassment, fraud, and abuse of power. Her year-long campaign to force me off my property ended with her own exile from the community she thought she controlled. Justice has a way of finding people who mistake temporary authority for permanent power, and sometimes that justice comes with handcuffs, criminal charges, and a very public reminder that the law applies to everyone, including self-appointed neighborhood dictators who forget the difference between actual authority and imaginary control.